One night I had a dream about a cat. I dreamt about a big marmalade cat that was locked in an upstairs bedroom. Now it was a cat that it was as big as a sheepdog in me dream. And I opened the door and it looked at me with furious eyes and white fangs bared back to the gums as if it was looking at its breakfast. And when I woke the following morning, I checked a website for dream interpretation which said that dreaming of an angry cat wasn't really good news. If the cat is aggressive, the website declared, you may be having problems with the feminine aspect of yourself. Well, I didn't need broadband to learn that. I've had problems with the feminine side of myself for years. I simply don't know what it is. I think now, 14 or 15 years later, in my late 60s, I've come to terms with the mystery of who I am without defining it as either male or female, feminine or masculine. And to a large extent, I suppose I would be perceived as an owl fella, and I'm kind of happy with that. It's like, it doesn't matter. There's a certain point after you go beyond 65, and it feels like the footballer who's left the pitch, you know? It doesn't matter anymore. It's not relevant to me. What's relevant to me now is to be present and grateful for health and life and just take one day at a time. So I suppose I stopped looking for my feminine or masculine self a while ago. But in those days, when I was living in Mullingar, I searched for my feminine side everywhere. I quarried for it in Leitrim without much success, and when I was roaming the streets of Mullingar, I never found it. I used to hoover the stairs. I'd mop the kitchen floor, I'd put out the rubbish, I'd wash the clothes, and still I couldn't root out this feminine self. I still felt inside I was a real hairy old man. I remembered the mobile phone ringing one day, and there was a woman's name glowed on the screen. Somebody I'd be delighted to talk to. How are things, she said. I said things are not good, and I explained about the cat in the dream and my despair at ever finding me feminine side. Sometimes I used to say things on the phone because I wanted people to reassure me in the opposite opinion. Sometimes like I'd say, oh, now I'm a bad person. And it'd be just because I wanted to hear the voice at the other end saying, no, you're not, you're a good person. So I said, maybe not being in touch with my feminine side is what causes me to feel like an idiot most of my life. What do you think? I was hoping that she'd reassure me and say, oh, Michael, sure, you have a very strong feminine side, you know. But she didn't. There was a big long pause, a succulent pause. Well, she said, maybe there are issues you should be addressing. Yes? Feck you, I thought. I had an urge to hang up. I said, I need to go now. Go where? She wanted to know. Nowhere important. That was it. There was no consolation in that phone call. And I did have to hang up actually because the bin lorry was on the street. I could hear it. And I wasn't going to miss the bin yet again. I was certain it was Black Bin Day when they collected the domestic waste, because the previous week had been Blue Bin Day when the paper was collected. And I forgot about Blue Bin Day the previous week. And the week before that, I had missed Black Bin Day. So both bins were stuffed to the gills, up to the lids. But as I was parking the black bin at the front door, I noticed that there was a row of blue bins along the street at the other houses. So I rushed across to the gala shop, bought another tag, switched bins, stuck the blue tag on the blue bin, just as the lorry floated to a halt at the curb beside me. And then after all that incompetence, I'd be exhausted, so I went back to bed. And I got up at lunchtime. I did things like that, I have to admit now. When I was in my late 40s, even into the early 50s, there was times where if I was up early in the morning and doing that sort of domestic stuff and having no feminine side and not having any ability to feel comfortable with the domestic issues that I was having to deal with, because at the time I was living on my own, doing all that stuff, I'd be so exhausted by about 9:30, I'd be going back to bed, and I'd stay in the bed until lunchtime. And at lunchtime I rose and I phoned Alina. Alina was good with cats. And being a woman, I thought she might know something about the feminine side. But she wasn't having a good day either. I asked her what was the matter, and she said, I'm fed up with the girls I work with. They spend all day looking at their watches. They are lazy. Or maybe they're having problems with their feminine side, I suggested. They are women, Alina pointed out. True, but then perhaps they're having problems with their masculine side, I suggested. Irish people are always unhappy, she said, except when they drink. I protested that even when drinking, Irish people remain unhappy. I knew a teacher once in Sligo. He'd spend late nights with me in Harrigan's pub in the mid-70s, drinking aimlessly. And one night I said to him, you're not a happy man. He had an elbow on the bar, a cigarette in his right hand, floating in the air between us. He was leaning towards me, tears welling up inside him. He said, I married an English woman. She was very jolly. I couldn't understand her. It made no sense. No sense at all, he said. Especially in the mornings, she'd be chuckling at the radio downstairs before I was even shaved. Alina smiled. She even said to me, you make me laugh. I had moments like that, I suppose, when I would make somebody laugh and I would feel I may not be in touch with my masculine side and I may not be in touch with my feminine side, but I am in touch with the clown. Like the masculine, for me, if you want to be stereotypical about it, you're talking all that football and bloke, camaraderie, lads in the bar. I could never get into it. I never played football or I'd run away from all that. On the other side, the feminine side, an ability to keep a house tidy or even make a bed. I don't mean that now as a feminine side, but I mean that as a cliched perception of it. But I was no good at that. If you want to go deeper and think about the feminine side as that which is listening and caring and nurturing, I felt a failure at that too. So the only thing that I probably connected with from an early age was the clown. And if I could make somebody smile, I was happy enough. I thought that is the best contribution I can make to the world. There was many a time, for example, when I'd be in the theatre writing plays and directing plays, and I used to ask myself sometimes when things would be tough and difficult, and I'd say to myself, why am I in this job, Why am I writing these plays? Is this some sort of awful, sad ego trip where you put in all this effort to making a play, to glorify your name as a playwright, and then you get 2 or 3 very good reviews and the show is over and everything moves on, and you say, well, was that worth it? Is that worth it as a life? I had big questions over that, but the time that I used to be able to answer it with a yes, theatre life is worth it, very much worth it, was when I heard people laugh. No matter if it was a play by Shakespeare or Tom Murphy or Brian Friel or some new young playwright, no matter. And if I was on stage as an actor saying lines and pacing the lines with the laughter of an audience, that's what made me feel, my goodness, this is worth it. This is a privilege to be in this profession of theatre. I remember one time in the Theatre Royal in Waterford, I was involved as director and writer of a play for a company down there, and it really wasn't a happy experience for the actors in the show. And all through the rehearsal, it was so painful that you'd be saying, God almighty, is this worth it, all this pain and suffering? And then I remember on one of the previews, and I was sitting at the back of the hall, the Theatre Royal in Waterford, and there was 2 women who were sitting just in front of me, and they laughed all through the show. And I says to myself, that is what my life is about. You can make people laugh because you're saying something that's funny, like it's smart alecky and it's at the expense of somebody else. You can tell a joke, and a joke, a J-O-K-E, sometimes a joke is very abusive to other people. But the beautiful thing about the word clown is that the clown doesn't tell you something that's funny. It's more that the clown is funny. They incarnate what is funny about the human being. And usually they manifest what is sad. And what is sad is funny. You know the way a clown is very often unhappy? We call it a funny face, but it's usually kind of a big, sad mouth. And they're sad, and there's a banana, and they slip on the banana. And then they walk under a ladder, and a bucket of paint falls on their head. And every time we laugh, we're seeing somebody who is sad and to whom terrible things are happening, and it's intensifying their misery, and we find it hilarious. There's nothing as funny. Samuel Beckett, I think, said, there's nothing as funny as complete misery. And Samuel Beckett was a great man at the clowning. He was a great man to put characters in really difficult predicaments, sad predicaments, impossible predicaments. And he would put them there before us as presences on the stage, and we would find them funny. Funny in a profound way, funny in a way that is comic. You're watching a tragedy, it's all intense and it's all sad and it's all, oh my goodness, the fate and the destinies of the world are working against this person and now they're going to die and be destroyed. Terrible. But comedy, as Patrick Kavanagh said, is the completion of tragedy. Comedy is where you kind of stand back from the human being in all the human imperfections, with all the mistakes that a human makes, and you smile and you say, isn't it funny? There's something close to Buddhist detachment in that, I have to say. The clown evokes in people a sense of, look at me and how incomplete I am, and isn't that funny? Don't be attached to it like, oh, this is a tragedy, you know, that there's something bad happening. Isn't it almost funny that we are here at all? So I think that's what I was connecting with. As a child, all my life, the inner clown. And I think that is what brought me to obsess with religion when I was a teenager. Because it seemed to me that there was something in the spiritual path that was like clowning. Something, I know like there's a great phrase to have in the Orthodox Christian tradition, a fool of Christ, or Christ's fool. And these are people who are kind of crazy, but they're saints. God's love manifesting in the strange, crazy, let's say God's presence in the brokenness, the fracturedness of a human being's mind. There's one particular saint, Xenia. Don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's Xenia, Xenia. Xenia of St. Petersburg. And she lived, I think, about the start of the 19th century, and she was devastated by her husband's death. And she obviously was so broken by grief that it affected her mind. So she used to dress up as the husband in his clothes. And she gave away all his money that she inherited, but she gave it all away to the poor, to the people of St. Petersburg who were poor. Something in her heart was so broken that she could feel the pain of others. Might have been her feminine side. Might have been the feminine side of God. But she ended up herself dressed up in his clothes, old rags eventually, wandering around the streets of St. Petersburg and homeless. You can really see her because we have people who are homeless. We have people in every city in the world that live like that, damaged mentally, wounded, and living just on the streets and nobody minded them. There she was. That's where she ended up. And she is, in the Orthodox tradition, a saint. She's recognized as that God was really especially speaking with her and through her to the world. Well, I think that's very beautiful. I've always seen this connection with clowns and the spiritual path. I do say, I know nothing. I know nothing. I have nothing to say. I have nothing intelligent to say in these podcasts. Nothing. I'm just sharing with you how little I know. I'm sharing with you just being here. I love the energy of laughter. Nothing releases me more than laughter. Nothing soothes me more than laughter. Now, I was talking about Alina, and I used to meet her an odd time for a coffee. And when she would say to me, she says, "You make me laugh. You make me laugh." And she would say that to me often. Well, I would feel I don't need a feminine side or a masculine side if I can make you laugh. The rest of that particular day was uneventful. The big drama in the morning had been the bins and the cat's dream, the dream of the cat. But a very strange thing happened that afternoon. There was an old Polish man in very poor clothes knocked on the door. I was back home, doorbell went. I went out and there he was standing there. And he was selling charcoal drawings of cats for €10 each. And he handed me a little photograph of a young girl. And I turned it over, and in block capitals on the back of the photograph there was scrawled that the little girl was sick. This was a picture of her. This was her daddy, and he was trying to raise money so that she could be cured. Well, I took one of the drawings of him, and he smiled at me, and I handed him the money. "I dreamt of this cat this morning," says I. He didn't understand enough English to make sense of what I was saying. "I had a dream last night about a cat," I said again. But he smiled, and then he laughed, and he said, "Thank you." And I went inside with me charcoal drawing of a cat, and I put it on the mantelpiece above the fire. And I sat looking at it all evening. And I thought, I'm some clown, but I feel okay about it.